This is the story of Ibukun, the girl who succeeded in stealing the manhood of men in several villages. It is inspired by true events.
In the small village of Alaj lived a young beautiful girl called Ibukun. She was the only daughter of Femi and Zainab, and they loved her so much. Ibukun was their treasure and they would do anything for her. Ibukun's parents were not rich, but with the little they had, they would buy the best clothes for Ibukun. They made sure her hair always looked good and that she had the best children's toys. The love Ibukun's parents showed to her was evident, as she always looked neat and well-fed. In fact, one would say that Ibukun looked like a princess from a royal family, thanks to how well her parents took care of her. Now, Ibukun had an uncle named Bayo who lived in the same house with her and her parents. Unfortunately, Uncle Bayo was a drunkard and a womanizer. And as if that wasn't bad enough, Uncle Bayo was lazy and jobless, and he would sleep all day, waiting for Ibukun's parents to come home from work to give him food. Ibukun's parents didn't like that Uncle Bayo was lazy and jobless, but they still treated him with kindness and respect. They would give him food when they came back from work, but little did they know that things were about to change for the worse. One evening when Ibukun's parents got back from work, they met Uncle Bayo seated outside their house. He looked unhappy and bothered, and Ibukun's father, Femi, asked what was wrong. "Bayo, why is your face looking sad and worried? Is everything okay?" Uncle Bayo responded, "No, everything is not okay. The land our father left for us, let us sell it so I can take my share and live my own life the way I want to." This made Ibukun's father unhappy, and so he responded, "But Bayo, it is too early to sell that land. We need to wait a few more years for the area to be developed. Then we can sell the land for a much higher price. Besides, our children are the ones who should reap the benefits of the land. Ibukun is just 11 years old and you don't even have a child yet. Let's wait a few more years before we think about selling our father's land." But these words made Uncle Bayo furious. He wanted to get his share of the land quickly so that he could squander his money on alcohol and women. He had made up his mind that if his brother Femi did not agree to sell the land, then he would do something terrible and unthinkable, and that was exactly what he did. One fateful night while Ibukun and her parents were having dinner at home, Uncle Bayo walked in with a keg of palm wine. He said to Ibukun's parents, "I brought some palm wine for us to have dinner with. I hope you will drink it with me." Ibukun's father replied, "Of course we will drink the palm wine with you. Please go to the kitchen and get us some cups to drink from." Then Uncle Bayo went into the kitchen to get the cups, but little did Ibukun's parents know that Uncle Bayo was up to no good. Shortly after Uncle Bayo went into the kitchen, Ibukun asked to go and ease herself. And as she walked past the kitchen heading to the bathroom, she took a quick glance into the kitchen and saw Uncle Bayo rubbing the cups with a strange substance. But Ibukun was just 11 years old, so she didn't know what the substance was. Also, she didn't think anything of it. She felt Uncle Bayo was just cleaning the cups. Ibukun returned to the dining room and so did Uncle Bayo. Uncle Bayo poured the palm wine into the cups and handed them to Ibukun's parents, who drank from it. Unfortunately, Ibukun's parents had no idea that Uncle Bayo had poisoned the cups with the strange substance he rubbed on them. And that was when tragedy struck. Shortly after Ibukun's parents drank from the cups, they began to struggle for breath. Suddenly their eyes turned blood red and they fell on the floor gasping for air. Ibukun panicked. She was just 11 years old, but she knew at that very moment that her parents were dying. She screamed, "Daddy, Mummy, please don't die." And while Ibukun screamed, Uncle Bayo just stood there watching with a smile on his face. And that was when Ibukun knew that the substance she saw him rub on the cups was poison. And as Ibukun's parents were on the floor fighting for their lives, Uncle Bayo leaned forward and said to his brother Femi, "You think you can control our father's land, right? You think selling it is solely your decision? You are wrong. You and your wife have drunk poison and you will die. Then I will sell the land and take all the money for myself." Sadly, Ibukun's parents died moments later, leaving her alone with her wicked Uncle Bayo. Ibukun cried uncontrollably when her parents took their last breaths, and then in a moment of rage she turned to attack Uncle Bayo. And as she hit Uncle Bayo with her tiny little arms, she kept yelling, "Uncle Bayo, you poisoned my parents. You have killed them. I hate you. I will tell everyone in the village." But Uncle Bao just shrugged her off and said, "Yes, I killed your parents. Your father wanted to deny me my birthright. But now that he's dead, I'll sell the land and have all the money for myself." But Uncle Bao knew that it would take some days before he could find a buyer for the land, and he couldn't let Ibukun out of the house before he sold it, or else she would tell everyone in the village about what he had done. He thought about killing her, but he changed his mind after taking a close look at Ibukun's body. She was just 11 years old, but she was taller and more developed than most girls her age. Mere looking at Ibukun put lustful thoughts in Uncle Bao's head, and that's when he had an idea. He said to himself, "I will not kill Ibukun. She's a beautiful young girl. I will just lock her in one of the rooms and keep molesting her until I sell the land. And after I sell it, I will disappear with the money and no one will ever find me." So Uncle Bao dragged Ibukun into an empty room in the house and molested her. But one time was not enough for Uncle Bao. He would come home drunk every evening and molest Ibukun repeatedly until he was satisfied. He barely gave her food to eat. He would just open the door to the room where he held her captive and throw leftovers on the floor for her to eat, then lock the door again. But Ibukun refused to eat any of the leftover food. Every day she would just lay on the ground in horror, knowing that a drunk Uncle Bao would come home anytime soon to molest her again. Unfortunately for Ibukun, there was nothing she could do because she was just a small, powerless girl. She couldn't scream for help either because their house was in an isolated part of the village and no one would hear her cries. So, for days Ibukun lived in fear and torment under the wicked captivity of her own uncle. This experience was extremely traumatic for Ibukun. She was too young for such, and this made her lose trust in men, especially the ones who drank too much alcohol and visited brothels like her Uncle Bao. However, Ibukun's captivity would soon come to an end. Because on the 6th day after Uncle Bao killed her parents, he found a buyer for the land. And after Uncle Bao sold it, he took the money and ran away without coming back to the house. That very evening, Ibukun was surprised that Uncle Bao did not return home to molest her. And while that gave her relief, she was already traumatized beyond repair. Just days ago she lived happily with her parents, only to see them murdered by her own uncle, who locked her up and molested her repeatedly for his own animalistic pleasures. Thinking about how she was repeatedly molested made her hate men even more, and as she lay on the floor of the room crying, she heard a loud knock on the door. It was Kaode, a friend and colleague of her father. He hadn't seen Femi at work for days and wondered what was going on. So he decided to come to the house to see if everything was okay. And as Kaode continued to bang the door, Ibukun called out for help. She screamed, "Please, whoever's there should break the door and enter. I'm locked inside." Kaode was shocked to hear this. He recognized Ibukun's voice and so he broke the door and stormed into the house. Ibukun kept screaming until Kaode found the room where she was locked and rescued her. Kaode then asked Ibukun what happened and Ibukun told him everything. Kaode was shocked. He couldn't believe that Uncle Bao of all people would kill his own brother and his wife and molest their daughter repeatedly. Kaode was a kind man, so he decided to take Ibukun to his house, since she had now become an orphan. But Ibukun was afraid of following Kaode home. She didn't want to be alone with another grown man due to what she had experienced with Uncle Bao. Kaode could see the fear in Ibukun's eyes, but he didn't have any bad intentions towards her. He convinced her to come with him and she did, but she was still afraid. When they got to Kaode's house, he gave Ibukun food and some fresh clothes. He also gave her a room of her own so she could sleep well. Kaode planned that by morning he would take Ibukun to the village authorities to report the matter and begin a full-scale search for Uncle Bao so he would pay for his crimes. But as Ibukun lay on the bed in the room, she couldn't stop thinking of how Uncle Bao kept molesting her over and over again. But something was different this time. Before, she would feel fear and shame when she recalled the experience, but this time her heart was filled with anger, hatred for men, and revenge. And as she kept on wondering what would become of her life now that her parents were dead, the door of the room flung open all of a sudden. It was Kaode, who was shocked to see that Ibukun was still awake so late in the night. Kaode said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I should have knocked. I didn't know you were still awake. I saw that the lights were on and I wanted to turn them off." Kaode then turned off the lights and left. But Ibukun didn't believe him. She thought he came to rape her just as her uncle Bayo did to her. And without thinking twice, she decided that she was going to run away from Kaode's house that very night. Ibukun crawled through the window and snuck out of Kaode's house. She had no idea where she was going, but she didn't want to stay in a house alone with a man. Several years passed and Ibukun grew up to be a beautiful young lady. She was now 22 years old, but she was no longer the sweet, innocent Ibukun from before. Her traumatic experiences as a child had driven her to become a prostitute who wandered from town to town and from hotel to hotel, sleeping with men for money. But shockingly, it wasn't just money Ibukun took from men, as one unlucky customer would soon find out. One night, Ibukun was alone in a bar drinking when a drunk man walked in. The man knew she was a prostitute by the way she was scantily dressed, so he approached her and asked how much for a night. Ibukun replied, "Any amount you want to give me is fine." The drunk man, knowing he could have his way with Ibukun and pay peanuts, hurriedly asked that they get a hotel room. They did, and after several rounds of sex, the man said he was not going to pay Ibukun anything. And to his greatest surprise, Ibukun wasn't even bothered. This is because there was something else she had taken from him and he didn't even know. The drunk man walked out of the hotel laughing. He said to himself, "That prostitute must be very stupid. How can I have several rounds of sex with her and not pay, and she didn't even bother asking me for money? She's really dumb." And as he staggered close to a gutter, he decided to urinate. He opened up his belt and trousers, only to discover something truly shocking. His manhood was gone. "My God!" the man screamed. He thought it was a dream, but it was real. His manhood was missing and he couldn't explain how. And as he screamed for help, he thought to himself, "But this is the same manhood I used to sleep with that prostitute moments ago. How did it get missing?" Immediately, all the alcohol he had taken cleared from his eyes. He ran back to the hotel where he left Ibukun to ask for explanations. Unfortunately for the man, Ibukun was gone when he got there. The man panicked uncontrollably. He paced up and down the hotel reception, regretting every moment he had spent with Ibukun. He asked the receptionist, "Please, where is that lady I took into the hotel room? She's the one that recommended this hotel, so I'm sure she's a regular here." The receptionist answered, "I have never seen that lady in my life. This is her first time coming here." Upon hearing this, the unfortunate man ran outside, hoping he would run into Ibukun on the street. And as he searched around the vicinity, he started feeling a strange pain in the area where his manhood was meant to be. The pain grew worse every minute and it got so bad that the man fell to the ground, crutching the area where the pain was. Passers-by who saw what was happening rushed to help the man. They asked him what was wrong and he told them that his manhood went missing after he slept with a prostitute in a hotel, and now he's feeling excruciating pain. But before they could rush him to the hospital, the man screamed loudly in agonizing pain and died. Eyewitnesses who were gathered became afraid of what they had just seen and heard. They looked at the man's private area and saw that indeed his manhood was missing. That was when they began to murmur among themselves. One eyewitness said, "So the rumors are true. There is a prostitute who moves from town to town and hotel to hotel stealing the manhoods of unsuspecting customers. So she has finally found her way to our village? We all better be careful." Another eyewitness, who was a lady, replied, "Well, from what I've heard, she only steals the manhood of men who sleep with her. So if you don't want your manhood stolen, then don't sleep with prostitutes because you don't know who is who. Nobody knows what she looks like because she's always moving around. So yes, the men of this village need to be very careful." Meanwhile, far away from the hotel, by a river deep inside a thick forest, stood Ibukun. She was in front of a great tree with her hands outstretched. And in her palms, Ibukun held the manhood of the drunk customer. And as she held his manhood, an old but beautiful lady came out of the tree and stood face to face with Ibukun. The old lady was about 55 years old and she had very dark long hair that touched the ground. She was 8 feet tall and her eyes were as white as snow. She had very long fingernails that resembled the claws of a lion, and she was barefooted. Then the old lady said, "Good, you have brought my offering for the week. You have 4 more weekly offerings to complete the total sacrifice of 100 manhoods." Once you have completed 100 manhoods, I will fulfill my own end of our agreement. Ibukun responded, Yes, great goddess. I know I have 4 more manhoods to present to you to complete my sacrifice. I will not fail you. The goddess smiled at Ibukun and said, I know you will not fail me. You've never failed me before. You've delivered all your weekly offerings on time, and I will be expecting the next manhood in a week's time. The goddess continued, I have given you the power to steal a man's manhood after they sleep with you without them noticing until it is too late. But be careful as you visit the next village because people are starting to notice the trend of missing manhoods. They now suspect that a prostitute is behind it, but there are many prostitutes around so they do not know it is you. Still be very careful. Ibukun thanked the goddess who entered back into the great tree. Then she left. Ibukun was now about to embark on a journey to another village where no one knew her. Her mission was simple, to find another unsuspecting customer whose manhood she would steal. Now it was time for Ibukun to set out to another village to steal another manhood. But she had to choose wisely because the story of a prostitute who steals manhoods had started to spread quickly. Ibukun thought to herself, which village should I go to? I need to go to a place where the people haven't heard about me. It's true no one knows my face, but I still need to be careful. And so she decided to go to Ukaba village, which was a bit far from the other villages where she had been stealing manhoods. Now, Ukaba village was known for having friendly and kind people. The villagers there always supported one another, and they never stole or committed any crimes against each other. But Ibukun was not aware of this. She assumed Ukaba village was just like the other villages that were filled with promiscuous and wicked men. Little did she know that her next target wouldn't be the kind of man she expected. As Ibukun arrived at Ukaba village, she decided to lodge in a small hotel. She knew that there would be a lot of men there drinking, and that one of them would get drunk and try to approach her. Ibukun was already very beautiful, but the clothes she wore that night made her even more gorgeous. She sat by the bar of the hotel, drinking and waiting for a man to approach her, but to her greatest surprise, all the men there minded their business. None of them showed any interest in her, so no one approached. This gave Ibukun a lot of concern. She had 4 more manhoods to deliver to the goddess, and she had exactly 4 weeks to do so. If she couldn't find a manhood to steal that week, it means she would be behind on her delivery to the goddess. But she decided to be patient, believing that it was only a matter of time before a man approached her. And she was right, because just as she took the last sip from her cup, she heard a man's voice behind her. Hello, my name is Jide, what's yours? Ibukun turned around and saw a tall, handsome man standing beside her. She quickly regained her composure and said, Hello, my name is Ibukun. Pleased to meet you. Jide asked if he could sit with Ibukun and she agreed. They chatted for a while and had more drinks, but Jide didn't flirt with Ibukun in any way. All he wanted was get to know her, as he had never seen her in that bar before. This surprised Ibukun, as all her previous victims were very straightforward with their demands for sex. But Jide was different. His intentions were pure and he was genuinely attracted to Ibukun. By this time, Ibukun began to grow impatient. She wanted Jide to take her to a hotel room where she could steal his manhood without anyone knowing. But she didn't want to be straightforward in order not to arouse any suspicion. However, time was not on her side, so she had to make a move. And then Ibukun said, So Jide, what are your plans for tonight? Aren't you planning to spend the night with me? Jide was shocked to hear this, as Ibukun looked too beautiful to be a prostitute. So he asked, Please do not be offended, but are you a prostitute? And without any hesitation, Ibukun said, Yes, I am. So if you're taking me to a hotel, please say so, and if you're not, then please leave me alone so another man can come for me. This was heartbreaking for Jide to hear. He was a kind, single man who was looking for a wife to marry, not a prostitute. And because of Ibukun's good looks and carriage, he thought she might be the one, but he was wrong. Still, Jide was too attracted to Ibukun to give up. He assumed she got into prostitution due to poverty. But little did he know that Ibukun wasn't interested in money. She was traumatized by how her uncle Bayo molested her when she was only 11 years old. And she was on a revenge mission against as many promiscuous and wicked men as she could find. And out of sheer ignorance, Jide said to her, Ibukun, You are too beautiful to be selling your body. You can get a job that will give you enough money to take care of yourself. I also like you very much, and if you stop prostituting, I promise I will marry you and take care of you." This made Ibukun laugh out loud. She said, "Did you just say marriage? Look, Jide, I am not interested in marrying any man. All of you are the same. You're all wicked. The only plans you have for women are to use and dump them. So if you're not taking me to a hotel room, then I have no business with you." Then Ibukun got up angrily and left without saying goodbye to Jide. And as she walked away, Jide could tell that Ibukun had been through a lot of unpleasant experiences with men. He also believed he could change her for the better. The following night, Ibukun returned to the same hotel to try again. She was hoping that this time, a promiscuous man who was drunk would approach her. She sat by the bar and ordered a drink, but before she could take a sip, she saw Jide walking in. Jide walked up to her and said, "Hello, Ibukun. I assumed you would return, so I decided to check back." But this made Ibukun furious, as she knew Jide had no interest in patronizing her. But before Ibukun could tell him off, Jide said, "I know you want to send me away, but relax. I have decided to spend the night with you. If that is the only way I can get to know you, then so be it." Ibukun was surprised to hear this, but she was also happy that she could now get Jide into a room and steal his manhood without anyone knowing. Jide paid for a room and they both went inside. But to Ibukun's greatest surprise, Jide made no attempt to touch her. He just ordered more drinks and engaged Ibukun in long conversations. Ibukun didn't mind at this point. As long as they were in a room together, she knew it would only be a matter of time before Jide drinks more than his head can carry, and then she'll steal his manhood. And that's exactly what happened. Jide drank so much that he eventually passed out, and it was Ibukun's time to strike. Ibukun was ready to say the incantations the goddess had taught her, the one that would magically remove a man's manhood without him knowing. But before she could say the words, she paused to think. Ibukun's targets were drunk, irresponsible, promiscuous men who took advantage of women. Men like her Uncle Bayo, but Jide was not like that. Jide had been kind and nice to her. He even offered her a job so that she could stop prostitution. Even as they were in a hotel room, he respected her enough not to touch her. Ibukun thought about all these things and decided that Jide didn't deserve to have his manhood stolen. Ibukun saw him as an innocent and nice man. In fact, since her Uncle Bayo molested her when she was 11 years old, she had never come across a man as nice as Jide. Amazingly, Ibukun had started developing a likeness for Jide. He was the first man she had developed even the slightest feelings for since she became an adult. After being molested by Uncle Bayo when she was a child, Ibukun thought it was impossible for a man to be nice. But seeing how gentlemanly Jide behaved to her put second thoughts in her head. And for the first time since she started stealing manhoods, Ibukun broke down in tears as she realized the monster she had now become. All in the name of revenge. And as Ibukun wept, Jide woke up from his sleep and saw her crying. He wondered what had happened and asked, "Ibukun, what's wrong? Why are you crying? Did something happen while I was asleep?" Ibukun looked at Jide and decided to confess everything. "Jide, I was molested by my Uncle Bayo when I was only 11 years old. My Uncle Bayo also poisoned my parents and killed them right in front of me so he could sell our family land and keep the money to himself. After he sold the land, he left me locked in a room and ran away with the money. My father's friend Kaode rescued me and took me to his house, but I was afraid that he too would molest me, so I ran away into the forest. That was when I met a goddess who took me in and raised me. I told her my story and she said she would help me find Uncle Bayo and get revenge on him for killing my parents and molesting me. But on the condition that I steal 100 manhoods and bring them to her. The goddess taught me incantations that can make a man's manhood disappear without him knowing. I have stolen 96 manhoods so far, and yours was going to be 97. I planned to steal it while you were asleep, but my conscience didn't allow me to because you've been nice to me." Jide nearly fainted after hearing Ibukun's confession, as he knew that he was moments away from having his manhood stolen. But he regained his composure and allowed Ibukun to finish her story. Then Ibukun continued, "If I do not steal 4 more manhoods and deliver them to the goddess, then I will never find Uncle Bayo and make him pay dearly for killing my parents and molesting me." Jide looked at Ibukun with pity, as he could not imagine the pain of losing both parents on the same day and being molested at such a young age. Jide now understood that Ibukun wasn't really a prostitute, that she was only using prostitution as a cover to get men into rooms where she could steal their manhoods without anyone knowing. He now understood that Ibukun only targeted wayward men that reminded her of her uncle. But even though Jide was a kind man, he knew that Uncle Bayo had to be found to face punishment for what he had done to Ibukun. At the same time, he didn't want Ibukun to keep stealing manhoods all in the name of revenge. Jide wiped the tears from Ibukun's eyes and promised her that everything was going to be all right. He said they would find a way to resolve the matter and find Uncle Bayo, but there was something she had to do first. And that was for Ibukun to promise not to steal any manhood again, and to seek cleansing for all the manhoods she had stolen in the past. Jide also told her that she needs forgiveness from the souls of the men who had died from it. Because even though they were wayward and unjust men, it was not her place to take justice into her own hands. Jide said to Ibukun, "I will take you to the most powerful spiritualist I know. He will cleanse you of all your sins and break your bond with the goddess. After that, he will also help you locate your Uncle Bayo. Then you can report him to the village authorities who will punish him according to law." Ibukun agreed, and so Jide took her to meet a powerful spiritualist in the next village. The spiritualist was known for solving even the most difficult spiritual problems, but he was also feared because of his connection to the gods and goddesses. When they arrived, the spiritualist, an old man with deep wrinkles and fiery eyes, listened carefully as Ibukun narrated her sad story from the beginning. The spiritualist sighed deeply and said, "Ibukun, you have gotten yourself into a dangerous agreement with a powerful goddess. She is not one to forgive easily, especially when you have broken your promise to her. But we will try." He lit a fire in the middle of the room and threw some herbs into it. The smoke rose and filled the room with a strange, sweet smell. The spiritualist began chanting in a low voice, summoning the goddess who had made the agreement with Ibukun. The flames grew higher and suddenly, a voice was heard from the fire. "Ibukun, how dare you summon me without delivering the remaining 4 manhoods you promised me?" The voice was loud and angry and Ibukun trembled in fear. The spiritualist raised his hands and spoke calmly. "Great goddess, forgive her. She has realized her mistakes and seeks to free herself from this agreement. What can be done to end her contract with you?" The goddess recognized the spiritualist's voice. She knew that the man was also powerful, so she had to interact with him respectfully. The goddess' voice became soft, knowing she was now talking to the spiritualist, and she said, "If Ibukun truly wants to be free, she must make a sacrifice. I will accept 5 large white cows as an offering. Bring them to the sacred river by the next full moon, and I will release her from her promise." The fire died down and the room became quiet again. Jide and Ibukun looked at each other and they felt a strong feeling of relief. Although they were also worried because 5 large white cows were not easy to find or afford, but they knew they had no choice. But before they could figure out how to get the cows, the spiritualist had to first cleanse Ibukun of her own sins. She had stolen 96 manhoods and some of her victims had died. He said to Ibukun, "You must bathe in the river of blood for 7 straight days. If you come out of the river alive on the 7th day, then it means the souls of those you hurt have forgiven you. But if you drown in the river of blood, then it means the souls of the ones you hurt are thirsty for your blood in return." Ibukun was afraid, but she was willing to take the risk. She had made up her mind to either be cleansed completely or she dies. And after bathing in the river of blood for 7 days, Ibukun came out alive. This meant that the souls of those she hurt had forgiven her, as they knew she only committed those atrocities due to the trauma she suffered after being molested by Uncle Bayo. After Ibukun's cleansing, Jide sold some of his belongings to buy the cows the goddess demanded, and together, they took them to the sacred river on the night of the full moon. The goddess appeared and said, "I accept your sacrifice. Ibukun, you are free from our agreement. Go and live your life." With that, the goddess disappeared and Ibukun felt a heavy weight lift off her shoulders. She fell to her knees and cried, thanking Jide for helping her. The next morning they returned to the spiritualist to thank him. But before they left, the spiritualist said, "Ibukun, there is one more thing. Your Uncle Bayo is not far away. He is in a village called Age. If you want to confront him, you will find him there." Then Ibukun and Jide traveled to Age village. When they arrived, they asked around until they found Uncle Bayo. But what they saw shocked them. Uncle Beo was no longer the proud, greedy man who had destroyed Ibukun's life. He was now living in the streets, sleeping in gutters and eating from dustbins. His clothes were torn and dirty and his body was covered in sores. He looked sick and weak, barely able to walk. When Ibukun approached him, he looked up and recognized her immediately, and his eyes were filled with shame and fear. And with a trembling voice, Uncle Beo said, "I know I deserve whatever punishment you want to give me. I've lost everything. The money I stole from your family is gone. I wasted it all on women and alcohol. Now I have nothing. Please just end my misery." Ibukun stared at him, and her heart was filled with a mixture of anger and pity. She had dreamed of this moment for years, imagining how she would make Uncle Beo pay dearly for his crimes. But now, seeing him in such a terrible condition, she realized that he was already paying for what he had done. He had lost his dignity, his health, and even his will to live. Then Ibukun said to Jide, "There's no need to report him to the village authorities. He is already living in his own hell. Let's leave him to his fate." Uncle Beo cried bitterly as they walked away, but Ibukun felt no satisfaction. Instead, she felt a sense of closure, and it was now time to move on with her life. Ibukun moved into Jide's house, and with his encouragement she got a job as a teacher. She also became an advocate against child molestation, using her story to inspire others and bring awareness to the issue. And over time, Ibukun and Jide grew closer. They fell in love and Jide proposed to her. So for the first time since her childhood tragedy, Ibukun allowed herself to be happy with a man she truly loved. Ibukun's story is a reminder that no matter how much pain life brings, it is possible to heal and find happiness again. Forgiveness, love, and doing good can turn even the darkest past into a bright future. And remember, justice often finds its way without the need for revenge.